anywhere you want to go that's not like 100 feet from you, there's probably a quantum going to be involved. So there was the old quantum system, which I believe is what's actually up on the live server now because we're still working on the new stuff.
You look in some random direction and you fire off and you go. And it was great. Had visual effects and everything. Problem is, designers weren't happy, and CR wanted it to be a little bit different because we were going to have bigger maps, and he wanted it to function differently. The previous system basically said, I want to fire from here to here and go, set max velocity, everything, and you just went. There was no concept of ramping or, well, there was a slight concept of ramping, but it was very linear. So if it was a short jump or a long jump, it felt the same. And Sierra wanted the experience of having something completely different where if there was a moon and I would say from Earth to the moon, it's far, but it's considered a short jump. A long jump would be like from Earth to Pluto. So from Earth to the moon, he wanted it to kind of feel like a little bit slower because you don't reach that max top speed, while as the one at Pluto, you reach that top speed. But he didn't want like a linear increase to it. He wanted more of a dramatic build-up to get to there. So we were experimenting with a bunch of ways of getting to that point. And one of the ideas that came out in the very early prototype staging was the concept of really nail down the concept of a short jump and the concept of a long jump. And the first implementation was just a binary system. That means, oh, if we're at this certain distance, we're a short jump. If we're at this distance, we're a long jump. And what that gave us is different speeds. So when you went from Earth to the moon, it took a little bit longer to get there because you weren't going as fast. You could kind of enjoy the scenery and you just ran. And then when you went to Pluto, we gave you a much bigger speed, so you just zoomed by to get to there. But you still had the problem of it being linear, and it didn't have that build up. You just started increasing, and you got there, and you just stopped. We're missing that ramping up smoothness. And since it was a binary system, if you had the distance just slightly off, it would change from short jump to a long jump. So if I'm going from Earth to Mars, if that distance was just enough and I flew a little bit, it would be considered long. If I flew back, it would be considered short. And since depending upon what jump you're going to do, the effects, the sounds, and all that was completely different. And it didn't scale at all because it's one or the other. So went back to the drawing board going, all right, he wants that ramping, and design really wants that like curve. And what we were doing was we use motions. We use a constant acceleration. So you start at a velocity, and you had an end velocity, and you literally did a linear curve as you accelerated over time, or your velocity increased over time. But that gives you that straight line, which is not what we wanted. And so what design wanted was like a little curve up. So you can think of it like, what was that movie? Back to the Future. You're in the DeLorean, you put the pedal to the metal, and you get the 88. That gives you a nice little curve. But then as soon as you hit that 88, you ramp up like crazy. So you want that initial speed up so you can kind of go, all right, I'm accelerating. You hit that boom phase, and then it just goes whoosh. So went back to the drawing board, took a look at it, and said, what could we do? Well, we're like, all right, acceleration is giving us linear. What happens if we go one higher? That famous movie, we'll go to 11. Well, in this case, we'll go one higher into the thing called jerk. What jerk is, we have a constant jerk, and we're having velocity and acceleration change over time. So what that gives you is, instead of your velocity being like this, it does that little curve. So if we use jerk to figure out how fast we're going to go at any given point, we can get rid of that binary system, and we just choose a position, and we know the maximum speed of the drive, we know the maximum or the minimum speed. We could calculate the min acceleration and max acceleration based off the jerk and ramp us up. So what that gave us is, no matter where we choose on the star map, whatever location, we'd get that nice little curve. So if I was going to Mars, I would accelerate and hit this the speed and then decelerate again. But if I was going to Pluto, I'd go all the way up, even a higher speed, cruise a little bit, and then go down. So it gives you that more short-term, long jump, hybrid sort of experience. And because it's no longer a binary or system where it's either short or either long, it's based off of the distance, we could tweak all of our effects to be based off speed. So when you're accelerating up, if you don't hit a certain speed, you don't get the tunnel effect. You just get these like little sparkles because you're not hitting that, I don't know, like a sound barrier of the quantum. You're not hitting the quantum barrier. You're going just right before it. You are going faster, but you're not hitting the barrier to break the sound. So you have the little effects, and then you dip down a bit. But if you go a little bit further out, you hit the barrier, so we trigger on the effects, and it makes a much more dramatic thing. So it gives you that, all right, I get to a system, there's a planet, I select one of the points, I could get closer to it, but I don't see the tunneling effect. But if I go click out something further out, go bam, go out and see the tunnel. It's quite a cool little interesting thing. And while doing this, since the math was kind of involved, we actually prototyped it out in a completely different executable, so we can give designers saying, hey, plug these in, see the graphs, see the velocity, see the accelerations. It's pretty cool.
When I came on, my first role here was starting the quantum travel conversion to 2.0. At the time, yeah, I mean, it did obviously fly at the time, but it just wasn't able to integrate well, and it'd be a totally different set of code, basically, from how everything else works. So bringing it over brings all that together. We get to use all the connections and stuff we natively get just being item 2.0. Plus the old drive, while it worked, had been kind of built alongside the design, so there was a lot of code in there that while it worked wasn't necessarily needed to go a certain way. It was really more getting it hooked where we could attach it to a 2.0 ship, but also getting it connecting to the pipe system for power, for heat, for things of that nature, for the fuel system. The old drive didn't use any of that mechanics because it wasn't compatible. So with the new system, as Max was building out pipes for fuel and power, I was able to start attaching those as well.
The effects for the quantum travel consisted of this tunneling effect originally. So Chris has asked for more of an adaptation to this. So he wants it more of a sort of Hollywood feel of a Star Trek-y sort of effect where this residue appears from the front of the ship and moves to the back of the ship. And then it just starts with a spooling stage that hits this acceleration rate, which is, as Chris puts, reaching the 88 miles per hour, like in Back to the Future. So once you get through the spooling stage, it's a mixture of residue just starting to build up from the front, and it just builds up more and more, and then it just flares up, and then you hit a big bang, which is like the entry effect into the quantum travel. So the starfield effect was just primarily this effect with loads of stars appearing, whizzing past with planets and sun all the way to your destination as you travel. This new effect we've added in is it adds more of a residue from the front of the ship that cones around the front of the nose of the ship and then leaves up more like whizzing flares, kind of what couldn't be done with the original CPU system. So we've had to use this new particle GPU system to add in thousands of dots that just throw off residue. What we originally had was this blue sort of plasma effect, but then Chris wanted to add in more colour, so we've grabbed in some of the colours from the engine trails, which we recently added. So we've got like for the Mustang, for example, or the Freelancer or stuff, we've got like this sort of tealy blue effect that mixed in with the blue plasma, and the M50 has like more of a yellowy orange and a blue effect mixed in. So game code provide us these tags and triggers, which are like spooling, the entry, the traveling effect, and the flash effect. So these all trigger at certain parts of the stages. So the spooling effect would trigger between the acceleration phase and when you enter. So then the enter effect would trigger when you enter to traveling. So then the traveling effect will loop as you're traveling from your destination to your other destination. So then once you hit your destination, it hits a flash entry or flash exit effect. And then it will, so the exit effect is this basically a big flash lens flare with a big explosion, sort of wispy smoke trails and traveling from where you exited, basically.
Going back to what quantum drive is, we have two parts to that specifically. One, design aspect. What does design want? What does CR want? And that was the slow ramping up and giving that little curve. And coming out of that, we play with the Excel, we play with the little program to figure out the math involved. The second part is, okay, we have this math, it's jerk, there's formulas for it. We have pages and pages of how we could calculate it, which is cool, but how do we translate that into the game? And that's always the tricky part. Unfortunately for us, constant jerk with acceleration and velocity, we know certain parts of the formula, so we can adapt that into programming into different parts. And how we did that was, there's actually 5 phases of quantum drive. There's the initial ramp, which is you're going from 0 to that 88 miles per hour. We're actually going to replace that to going from your current speed to afterburner, because we finally have afterburner. So you can think of that as going from 0 to your afterburner, or whatever your speed is. That's just a linear velocity. So that's one block where we have to calculate the distance and the speed. So once we calculate that, we put it here. Then we have the ramp up phase, which is where we introduce the jerk of your curve to figure out what your maximum speed is. And we calculate that stuff. We put it here. Then we have the middle part, which is the cruise. So if you were actually to hit the maximum speed of your drive, we have to stay in this top speed for a while and then kick out. So we put that here. And then we have the ramp down and the speed down, which are the same as the speed up and ramp up, but just inverted to go from your top down. So we have put all those on the side and we go, okay, what do we need to get this functional? We have all the math and we have all the time. That's another fun thing, is we needed this system to be predictable. So if I knew the start time and the end time, I need to know where I am at every given point. So we need an analytical solution. And lucky for us, those have all been derived off Newtonian physics for years, which is awesome. So knowing those key 5 parts, we broke it down into distance. So if we know the distance, we could do a couple things. We could figure out the speed up phase. We know the velocity and we know the current velocity. We could figure out the distance will be during and there. We could figure out the distance it would take to hit max, and then we do that on both sides. So we leave the cruise out. And that gives us the ability to do 2 things. One, if we're able to hit top speed. If we're able to hit top speed, it makes the formula so beautiful. We could do the easy path. And then if we can't do the top speed, this is where it gets complicated, because we have to solve I think it was a 4th order polynomial. And that math is just bonkers, so I'll spare you the details. But we had to solve that fun guy using a very quick and dirty solution to make sure that it's performance, not just performance heavy. So we calculate all the distances that you're going to be in each one. And then from there, we could calculate the time. And then we split it out and save the information. It's called a quantum snapshot. So we figure out the distance you'll be. We'll figure out where you're going to be at any point in time. And then from there, when we pass in a time, we could go, all right, this time we're going to be at phase ramp down. So at ramp down phase, and then we could go, oh, nope, we're going to rewind back. Okay, we're actually here. So we have this time, which allows us to go kind of backwards and forwards if we wanted to. 1, this is for networking. 2, if we wanted to, for track view for cinematic sequences, we can wind back in time. So it makes everything nice and easy and beautiful. But it took quite a long time to figure out the math, figure out how to break down everything so it works in networking, works in multiplayer, works in track view, works in cinematics. One solution that works in all the fun details. But because it's timeline based, we could rewind back and forward. We could play effects depending upon where we are on the timeline. And it just works beautifully. Lots and lots of coffee to get here.